cure was hidden in our DNA, and one scientist set out to find it. Dr. Chakrabarti, your work didn't just change how we see the disease, it reshaped how the world treats and understands it.
Honestly, I have been surrounded by books since my childhood, and that curiosity has never left me.
Your research on congenital glaucoma has truly pushed the field forward.
Genetics is everywhere. I mean, you name it, it touches every corner of life.
You walked so that the next generations could run.
From diagnostics to research to final translation through precision medicine, it's all interconnected. Imagine a mother giving birth to a blind child. It's heartbreaking. For many families, it's day one of their lifelong journey.
Welcome to FaceTime with Leaders, a podcast brought to you by Directors Institute World Council of Directors. Here we explore not just the strategies, but the human stories behind the success. In a world where groundbreaking research can reshape the future, few have made as lasting impact in the realm of genetics as Dr. Subhabrata Chakrabarti. As a leader in genetic research focused on primary congenital glaucoma, Dr. Chakrabarti's work has influenced not only how we understand the disease, but how we approach treatment and care on a global scale. With years of dedicated research across multiple countries and institutions, Dr. Chakrabarti's contribution have been pivotal in advancing the field of human genetics. With multiple leadership roles across Association of Research in Vision and Ophthalmology, ARVO, which is the largest body of vision researchers and educators in the world, he continues to shape the future of genetics and eye research in India and beyond. Today, on FaceTime with Leaders, we are going to learn about Dr. Chakrabarti's inspiring career, his path to discovery, and his vision for the future of genetic science. Dr. Chakrabarti, it's real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you again, Charu. And it's also a pleasure to be a part of FaceTime with Leaders. And obviously, I'm looking forward to this dialogue, which I presume is going to be very, very interesting.
Same, yeah. I'm just looking forward to it. This subject is fairly new to me, so I'm eager to learn all the facts that you lay across.
All right.
So let's get started. Dr. Chakrabarti, it's great to have you here today. And to get started, could you please share your career journey with us? How did it all start for you? And how did your path lead to where you are today?
Sure. So when I look back at my career journey, there are multiple facets to it. It actually evokes multiple facets. Firstly, I was born and brought up in an academic environment because my father, Dr. S.B. Chakrabarti, he is an anthropologist.
Wow.
Who led the Anthropological Survey of India at multiple regions in the country, like the eastern, northeastern, southern, and also in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Oh.
So because he had a transferable job, so we were also kind of shifting from one state to another. As a child, as a youngster, I was liking it, going to different states, meeting different people, different cultures. At the same time, I was also being exposed to different regions very early in age, right? So that was an integral part of my growing. Secondly, since I was in this kind of an environment, unlike many of my friends and also myself who had different pastimes, an add-on for myself was that I was surrounded by various books.
Wow.
Books on science, books on history, literature, culture, geography, etc. And although I did not understand much of it, but I always used to glance through if the cover is good, if the writing is good, if there are something, if the pictures are good.
Right.
And since my father also was heading the survey, and he had many of these erudite professionals or stalwart
Right.
scientists who would visit him, and there used to be gatherings. And I used to also listen to the discussions, although I hardly understood any of it.
Understood it, right.
But what happened is this snippets of knowledge was gradually imbibing in myself. So that's what was happening during childhood. And later, I also had a interest in genetics, in biology to begin with, right from my school. And then it continued to my journey to undertake human genetics as a career. And in those days, of course, when you are in biology, the obvious expectation is that you will go into medicine. Fortunately or unfortunately, I did not qualify in medicine in medical school in the initial year. And so that was a decision which I had to take, whether to carry on with the basic science career or to wait and then qualify and then get back to, just because in those days, there were not too many options available.
Right.
I'm talking about more than 2 decades back.
Right.
So there were not too many options. But I took the plunge, and since I had this new understanding of human science, which is anthropology, and I also had an interest in biology, I said, let us continue and then let us see where it takes me. And it took me develop my interests in human genetics. And then that actually finally culminated to the highest levels of studying human genetics. I obtained my PhD, then a postdoctoral stint at the National Eye Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health in USA. And then right from those days, I was actually working in the area of eye. So I was fascinating at that point of time. And it carried to the extent that I have been a principal investigator and a lead researcher in eye research. So those were the main facets. And although my journey didn't begin in formal boardrooms, but it began in humble classrooms where we had the expertise of various teachers in those days, or researchers who were really stalwarts in those days at the university level. And so this kind of a combination actually helped me carve out a niche for myself. So today, when I look back at the journey, when I'm sitting in multiple leadership roles, as you mentioned about ARVO and various other organizations involved in vision research, in boards, in editorial activities, in ethical committees and other things, I think that the challenge that we took those days actually paid off. And today, it has not only kind of helped me in advancing my career, but the science has also progressed to a great extent. And if I see today, like the way genetics has kind of penetrated in all aspects of life, whether be it in your clinical diagnostics, in research, in precision medicine, name them, whatever. And we also saw its direct utilization when we had this pandemic. So from the development of vaccines and who would respond, who would not, and all of this. So I feel that it actually penetrated very well and it was more on the principles of blue ocean strategy and anti-fragility, because it was using almost the similar concepts, similar structures and framework to address the challenges of modern medicine. So that is how it came up. And I also, when I sit back and look into the outcomes from what I have gained from ARVO, so I've been able to promulgate their mission and vision for generating, not for necessarily generating, but for creating an enabling environment across multiple other countries. Particularly in India, we are a chapter of ARVO where we facilitate eye research and mentor youngsters to grow up to becoming eye researchers, and also kind of enable their careers towards that. So overall, I think it has been a fruitful journey.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, they say that a child's mind is like a sponge. It just soaks up whatever is around. So I guess that was
Right.
proven true for you because as a child you were learning through your father. And
Right.
fortunately for the field of genetics and the study of genetics, that you did not go through the standard medicinal round and
Right.
into that. So
Right.
it was wonderful, sir. And I love how you connected personal decisions with larger shifts in the industry.
Mhm.
And it's clear that your leadership lens has been shaped not just by roles, but by reflection. And it's wonderful that you have been able to not just, go forward yourself, but you've sort of carved a path for the coming generations.
Yeah,
And
at this point, if I can mention that while I was in academia, so I kind of realized that the decisions that we were making and uh, the the innovations that we were involved in,
right,
particularly because of the lack of infrastructure, lack of funding support in those days. So that actually was akin to what is actually done in startups, for instance.
right,
So
right.
you try to innovate with whatever available resources are there,
Agreed,
and
agreed.
then you kind of uh, build guidelines around it, and then kind of promulgate those guidelines and to
Right.
for a better good. I think that also was an integral part that happened at this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you walked so that the coming generations could run. So that
Right.
was
Yeah.
wonderful, sir. Kudos to you for that.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for sharing your thoughtful journey with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Chakrabarti, your work in genetic research, particularly around primary congen- congenital glaucoma, has had a profound impact on the field. Could you share some of the key findings that have really changed the way we understand this disease?
Yeah. So before that, I would actually like to emphasize why we have been working on this disease,
Right.
particularly primary congenital glaucoma. Because it's kind of an emotional thing that if you just imagine a child who is just born blind and will be blind for life. Just
Right.
imagine the plight of the family. The woman has delivered a child who is blind, cannot see, and right from day one becomes a burden to the family, burden to the society, and then the associated problems that comes about. Congenital glaucoma is one such disease where the child has the condition of glaucoma, which is basically due to excessively high pressure in the eye. It is kind of a developmental disease. It develops in the embryo itself.
Okay.
And uh, once the baby is born, you see that it has bulged eyes, it's kind of bluish cornea because it is opaque, and it has tearing. They are very sensitive to light. They cannot open their eyes, and they cannot obviously see. So over a period of time, surgeons have been able to kind of manage these conditions to a certain extent by
Okay.
surgical modality. So what
Mhm.
they do is they kind of drill a hole in the eye in a particular tissue, which actually kind of uh, releases the pressure because the fluid inside the eye, which is the aqueous humor, which we call it technically, has to
Right.
drain to the anterior part of the eye.
Right.
So there is a
Okay.
blockage to that.
Mhm.
And they drill that hole and make a passage. And so through that passage, the fluid drains out. And the pressures are
Right.
maintained, and certain children, they recover, certain
Okay.
need multiple surgeries, and
Mhm.
certain, despite that, still do not recover and go to complete blindness, where they have to be rehabilitated
Right.
of their daily work.
Mhm.
And in the state which we are in, so the undivided Andhra Pradesh, when we had started,
Right.
it has one of the highest prevalences of this disease.
Okay.
It
Okay.
is around 1 in 3,000 live births.
Wow. Okay.
And just because it is genetically what we call a recessive disease, that means parents carry the defect, but they are not symptomatic.
Right.
The child inherits both these copies of the gene, copies of the allele, and the child is symptomatic, develops the condition.
Right. Right.
we have a very high consanguinity rate in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
Okay.
The reason is because of the social structure. So
Okay.
because the families need to kind of keep their properties intact, and they
Right.
marry within the families. In the
Oh,
sense,
okay.
most of the time it is within first cousins or with an uncle and niece and so on and so
Okay.
forth. So what happens is, if there are deleterious genes in a pool or in a family,
Right.
that gets kind of conserved, and that leads to disease. So that is
Okay.
how this is assessed. And this is why the disease is more prevalent in such communities, like in
Communities.
Saudi Arabians, for instance. They also have
Right.
a very high prevalence. The
Okay.
gypsies, they have a very high prevalence. But if you go to the Western countries, which are more outbred, they are not marrying within themselves. This
Right.
prevalence of this disease doesn't occur.
Right.
So we were more dwelling into this from a social point of view,
Mhm.
from a clinical point of view, and then we wanted to explore that since
Right.
there are multiple manifestations of the disease, some are severe, some are not, some recover, some do not. So there must be some underplaying biological factors, and we wanted to target them. And it is so that we were interested in studying the genetics of congenital glaucoma.
Right.
And one particular gene, which is called the CYP1B1,
Yeah.
has been implicated in this disease worldwide.
Okay.
Okay. And what has happened is this defects in these genes, which we call as mutations, if there are defects, has been linked to the disease.
Okay.
And if you take the conditions of gypsies, one particular clade of gypsies, the South Arabians, they are almost affected only by this gene.
Okay.
When we screen this gene in the population, we find that it is hardly around 20% or so. So what happens? What is where is the unknown heritability of the remaining persons?
Right.
What are
Right.
they carrying? So
Right.
that actually kind of made us explore this further. And in those days, obviously, the science, again, as I said, funding and infrastructures were limited. So we had to work around our own available resources, make inferences. And one of the inferences that we kind of made, and that is interesting, I mean, there's a small story around it. It is the story of the gypsies.
Okay.
You know, gypsies originated in the northwestern part of India,
Okay.
and they migrated out of India in the 11th century during the formation of the Byzantine Empire.
Okay.
And these gypsies, they settled around the Slovakian region. They're called the Slova or the Roma gypsies.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has this disease has only one genetic defect, known genetic defect, and can be attributed to this gene.
Right.
Few centuries down the line, there was another exodus from the Roma gypsies, and some gypsies went and settled in and around the Bulgarian peninsula.
Yeah.
They are called the Balkan gypsies. Now, the Balkan gypsies, unlike the Roma gypsies, which is very homogeneous, they have 70 different subclans. You understand a clan, right?
Yeah.
There are multiple
Right.
groups, basically.
Right.
So there were 70 subclans. Now, a Roma marries a Roma, but Balkans marry across these subclans.
Okay.
So there was some kind of a diversity. And it so turns out that the frequency of these mutations in the Balkans and the Andhra populations are almost similar.
Okay.
So that led us to explore that if that is so, then the unknown heritability, what will be there, must be kind of similar amongst them too.
Right.
Because
Right.
they did not originate many years ago. It was only in recent evolutionary time scale.
Right.
And
Right.
so we got hold of these Roma gypsies through a collaboration. And we explored the entire genome. And it turns out that they have another gene, which kind of explains the remaining heritability.
Wow.
But that gene accounts only for less than 1% of cases in India.
Oh, okay.
So we were back to the same,
Right.
same square one.
Yes.
And well, initially it's frustrating, but then again, with the advent of genetics and with the advances in genetics, we then explored all the genes, scanning the entire genome, the mitochondria, etc. And then we hit upon certain other genes. And then what we found was interesting, that this disease is so complex, it is no more a kind of a Mendelian disease, which just you have parents affected, parents as carriers, and the child is affected, and that's it. No,
Right.
it's more complex than that. There are multiple genes, and the variants of these mutations, they interact to give the phenotype.
Oh, okay.
So one of the offshoots of this, one of our major discoveries was that we were able to ascertain functionally that in the cells, in the proteins, how these interactions would lead to a disease.
Okay.
So I think that
okay.
was one of our leading
breakthroughs. Yes.
breakthroughs. And then we also were kind of intrigued by the fact that these interactions are not necessarily restricted to only those who have the disease. There could be
Right.
individuals who are normals like you and me, who would also harbor some of these disease-associated changes.
Okay.
But
okay.
why do we not manifest the disease? That is because the genome is huge. It is 3.06 billion letters of A, C, T, and G, as you may know. And there are multiple other genes which act as modifiers.
Right.
So
right.
every time there is a defect, the genome has its own way of kind of controlling that. In some cases, it would not be able to control.
Right.
And they will manifest the disease. In others, there will be a control.
Wow.
And so we could actually do a lot of these kind of correlations, why they respond to treatment, why they're not, why are certain patients becoming severe, certain are mild, how do they recover, etc. And through all of these, what is more fulfilling is that we are able to see that these things are now being used in order to devise screening methodologies for child diseases. So that is one of the impacts that these studies have made. And in India's growth in genomics and in biotech sector and in this healthcare industries are also taking the fact that one gene doesn't cause a disease. There are many genes. And they need different strategies, different approaches to address the problem of genetic diseases as a whole.
Right. Wow, this is all so interesting. The way you translated deep research into real world impact is incredibly powerful, Mr. Chakrabarti. And it's one thing to discover something in a lab, and it's entirely another thing to shift how a condition is understood and treated across the system.
Right.
So that is such an eye opener. Wow. Kudos to you and your team, sir, that you've done such an incredible job. Thank you so much.
It was an eye opener for us as well when we found things in serendipity, because some of these were not known. These did not follow the traditional, or what I said earlier, or the conventional means, and it's something unusual. And when that unusual becomes the norm, the usual things over a period of time, that actually gives you a lot of satisfaction that you are on the right track. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Chakrabarti, your research spans across multiple countries and institutions. How have international collaborations enriched your work in glaucoma genetics?
Right. So, as knowledge has grown and we have been able to learn new things, it was apparent that work cannot happen in silos, because knowledge is vast, whether it is in research in genetics or in molecular medicine or in nanotechnology or in space science, in agriculture, in every sphere, actually. There has been tremendous advances in each of these areas. And it is humanly impossible for someone to kind of assimilate everything. We may understand few of the basics, but to deeply go into all of this is near to impossible.
Right.
And that actually has led to collaborations within our own community, within the institutions, outside the institutions, within the country and outside the country.
Right.
And this has occurred more so from the Indian perspective, because, as I said, that the infrastructure for research in those
Right.
days were not optimum. Funding was inadequate.
Right.
And so you could not do everything, even if you knew to do certain things.
Right.
So that is why we sought to collaborate.
Mhm.
And we collaborated extensively with people with complementary expertise, where we did part A of the work, they used to do part B, and then we used to kind of integrate them to
Right.
generate some meaningful insights to the work.
Mhm.
So I would just mention that in that I had extensive collaboration with the University of Massachusetts Medical School.
Yeah. Okay.
And with Dr. Hemant Khanna's lab, who was involved in studying eye diseases, and particularly retinal diseases, in animal models.
Okay.
So they used to kind of create the disease in animals like rats or mice, and then study the disease, the molecular part of the disease, or the molecular
Right.
phenomenon, or the molecular mechanisms were
Right.
kind of understood from those studies.
Right.
So when we were doing our works in human genetics, and since we did not have all kinds of transgenic facilities and things like that, so we sought to collaborate, and in these international meetings, we come across, because it's more for networking, you come
Right.
across people with similar interests, and that's how we got connected. And we collaborated. And the major part of our work, where we actually explain that genes do interact not only within their realm in the chromosomes, but even underlying genes, which actually contributes to the proteins,
Right.
they also interact
Mhm.
to kind of maintain the function. And any disruption to that, if there is a genetic defect or any mutation in those genes, that interaction is perturbed. That means it is hampered. And
Right.
with the hampering of that, that leads to other dysfunctions within the cell. Either there are problems with cellular functions, cellular proliferations, cell death. There could be multiple loss of functions.
Right. Right.
And that was one of our mainstays in collaborations. We also collaborated with University of California in San Francisco, and another of my collaborator, Dr. Saidas Nair, who also deals with animal models, have complemented many of my experiments. So as you can see, the expertise what we do not have here have been complemented by our colleagues overseas. And
Right.
that has helped to generate insights, newer insights, which has helped further to explain the disease process. I think that is what collaborations have helped us. And even in the global realm of things, like, for instance, now with this large scale data and other things, AI is being used very extensively to
Right.
kind of integrate many of these factors, because it is not just one or two aspects that people are trying to integrate. They are trying to integrate as a whole.
Right.
Like we have a study, for instance, where we are looking into a population which we have been screening for the last 2 decades. So
Yes.
this is a general population from Andhra and Telangana. And we are conducting an epidemiology study where we are trying to integrate not only their demographic data, but their clinical data, their risk factors, their imaging data, genetics data, proteins data, etc. So just you can imagine that if you're integrating so much of data, that needs very powerful algorithms. And AI is one such which can handle these kind of things. And that is where, again, we need to collaborate, and we do collaborate with people across the board. And that is how I think even the Indian biotech industries, health industries, they're also kind of using large-scale data sets to kind of bring out nuances that could not otherwise be seen with open eyes, like with
Right.
directly, because AI has the power to kind of integrate and then bring out certain nuances that are kind of critical
Right.
for a diagnosis of a disease or for the progression of a disease and so on.
Right.
And that is, and those then becomes your targets for undertaking therapy, right? So I think that is where we are kind of having partners, both national and international. And as I said, that international partnership has developed not only in our field, but in all fields. And people have been collaborating. And there are rules and guidelines for collaboration.
Absolutely agreed. Yes.
You cannot, one cannot just think of it and just start doing something.
Agreed.
There
Yes.
are defined guidelines. There are ethical norms that needs to be taken care of with the patient's rights. The dignity of the patient needs to be conserved, whichever country or region he belongs to.
Right.
And integrating all of that has been one of the mainstays of international collaborations. And so we have also been part of this, and so much so that we had to kind of understand the leadership diplomacies that pertains to other countries and other things. So in a sense, we could also claim ourselves to be kind of diplomats.
Right.
Right.
Right. I was just about to say the same, that it's like science is diplomacy in action.
Right.
And it's clear that your work doesn't just spans geographies, it bridges disciplines, ethics, and even ways of thinking.
Right.
So it's such an insightful perspective you gave, Dr. Chakrabarti.
Thank you again. Yeah, and we have been learning. It has been a learning process for us.
Absolutely.
As well, these are things that you learn on the job. These are things
Right.
that are not present just right there. And
Right.
as we develop, these things keeps developing. And even with our collaborations also, there are many norms that developed eventually. And we have to kind of direct our ways accordingly.
Right. So as a fellow of ARVO and a global ambassador of Vision Science, how are you working to promote international collaborations in eye research and education? How do you envision India's growing role in advancing ARVO's mission on the world stage?
Right. So ARVO's main function has been to kind of promulgate eye research and education worldwide across all geographies based on the unmet needs in those populations.
Right.
And since I have been part of the ARVO leadership for a long time, and as a recognition of those activities, I was also bestowed the Fellow of ARVO. So these things have gone on to kind of create models for different areas. For instance, when we have designed educational models, we first did a survey of what is needed. Like the needs in American nations may be different than what is needed in African nations, for instance.
Right.
The way we teach research methodology here in India and maybe in other underdeveloped countries may be slightly different because, of course, because the orientations would have been different. So we had to take care of all of those and design modules, teaching modules, which are available to the membership. And that spans across not only research, but also other facets of education. In the Indian perspective, we were conducting, we already had something like a Hyderabad Eye Research Group long back, even before I had joined. And eventually, many of these researchers in India were brought together by our founder chairman, Dr. Gulapalli Nageshwar Rao, and Professor D. Balasubramaniam, who was director of CCMB and then was our director, who is currently a director emeritus, and with other leaderships of other eye research organizations, they formed this Indian Eye Research Group. And over a period of time, this Indian Eye Research Group could be converted as an international chapter of ARVO.
Okay.
So now we are a chapter of ARVO who are promulgating their mission. We hold these annual conferences. In fact, the next annual conference is beginning this Friday
Okay.
in Shankara Netralaya in Chennai.
Okay.
And so it's usually a 2-day conference, and we have pre-conference workshops for members in training, graduate students, young clinicians, and researchers with advanced research technologies, tools, and techniques. And we also conduct an annual meeting every year.
Right.
Additionally, we kind of support through ARVO funds. We support one of these members in training to attend the main meeting, the annual meeting at ARVO, which is usually in the US.
Okay.
And we also support others through multiple fellowships.
Right.
ARVO gives a lot of fellowships, and many of these Indian researchers, the young researchers, have been able to get those fellowships. There has been grants given by ARVO to undertake bilateral research. There has been, and then there has been grants to promote meetings for between collaborators and so on and so forth.
Right.
So, these kind of things actually have helped in the mission, in promulgating the mission of ARVO.
Right. And putting India on the world stage.
On the world thing, and because one of ARVO's priority again has been diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since that is one of their major mottos, and that is also has been a part of including India into those groups. And now you find many Indians as in the leadership roles of ARVO, and you find them taking on various activities, being rewarded for their activities, and they are in their ways now carrying on this mission.
Wow. So as I said, earlier, that your is bridging continents, labs, and life. And the way you're carrying India's scientific voice to the global platforms with such purpose, that is so grounded and so inspiring, Dr. Chakrabarti.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dr. Chakrabarti, let's switch gears for a moment. We've talked about the deep stuff. Now, let's have a little fun with our rapid fire round.
Sure.
I'll ask you a few quick questions, and we'd love the first response that comes to your mind. Ready?
Sure.
One word your team would use to describe you.
Inquisitive, because I have a scientific bent of mind for everything.
That you've been since your childhood, I guess. First job you ever did, and what's one thing that it taught you?
The first job was at the LVPEI Eye Institute, where I joined as a postdoctoral fellow and then was upgraded to a faculty and then to the associate director of research. And what it taught me was 3 things, 3 Ds, very quickly: discipline, determination, and dedication. So we need to be disciplined in life. We need to have a determination. And if we are dedicated for that, sky is the limit.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So if you could have dinner with any scientist, living or dead, who would that be?
I will not have with one, I'll have with many. And because most of the famous scientists of our times who were gone before I was born. So I would actually, if given a choice, I'll like to have dinner with Albert Einstein, with Isaac Newton, with Gregor Mendel, and with Charles Darwin as well. Because while we know the nuances of modern science, but in those days when nothing was available, how could you just create those hypotheses which later turned on to be theories?
Right.
Everyone saw apples falling, but how could you determine gravity? The principles of gravity. So these are. So I would like to have with all of them.
Absolutely, that will be such an interesting dinner. Picking their brains. Wow. One place you'd love to visit for your research.
I worked at the National Eye Institute, which is part of the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, USA, and maybe other labs like the Scripps Institute in La Jolla in San Diego. That is another place where I would, because I've heard a lot of things about it,
Okay.
not good things,
Okay.
but haven't been there. A second
Right.
place, if there is a chance, would be Riken Laboratories in Japan.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So if you weren't in genetics, what would you be doing?
Cultivating any of my other hobbies. So I used to play cricket.
Okay.
I've been interested in that. So I would have continued if I had in our days, IPL would have been there. Maybe I would have persuaded my parents to not to put me into academics. I am a movie buff and I watch a lot of films, but more from the earlier I used to have kind of interest in acting, but
Oh, wow.
of late also in directions. Like
Wow.
I'm also fascinated by how the films are directed and put in that
Right.
1 hour, 1 or 2 hour things, how a lot of things are integrated, and now with a lot of modern technologies.
Right.
And third thing, I travel a lot. In the sense, I travel, I just take my car, and me and my wife, we are kind of roadies. We like to travel, see new places across the country.
Wow.
It's not restricted to the state, it's across the country.
Country.
And meet new people, new cultures, experience new cultures. And
Right.
so,
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. Thank you for that wonderful rapid fire round. I really had a lot of fun there.
thank you.
So, Dr. Chakrabarti, given the ethical challenges and safety concerns raised by high-profile gene therapy scandals like tragic case of Jesse Gelsinger and the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing controversy, how does your work address or ensure the ethical integrity and safety of genetic treatments or research, particularly in areas like gene therapy or gene modification? What safeguards or considerations are in place to prevent the kinds of ethical missteps that have occurred in the past?
Actually, the incidents that you mentioned about Jesse Gelsinger, the CRISPR controversy, and so on. And there have been a couple of other incidents also with the RP gene therapy for retinal blindness, which was given at random and had to be stopped in between. Actually, these incidents kind of provide us with the understanding that ethics sometimes outruns the pace of innovation. And these incidents also kind of tell us where we need to stop, pause for a moment, reflect on what has been happening or what has been done, do a deep introspection, have the ethical concerns again revisited so that we are in the right path.
Right.
What has happened is in modern innovations, the competition has been so rapidly paced. And because of these competitions, many of these ethical concerns have been compromised.
Right.
And that is a very sad thing for science. So when we do science, we need to consider the ethical aspects of it. If we are using the knowledge of science to do some betterment, either in the health conditions of the people or in kind of providing some comfort to
Right.
those who are already in a discomfort zone. I think one of the reasons why this has not happened is because of the regulations. That regulations in certain countries haven't been stringent. And even in countries where there has been stringent, people have tried to bypass them.
Bypass.
Yeah, like in our institute or in India, for instance, now we have very multi-tiered levels of examination. For instance, if I plan a research project, this research project has to be evaluated on its scientific merits. It has to be evaluated based on its ethical considerations. It has to be evaluated based on whether it is necessary. Will it address anything, or is it just a blue sky research where I'm just exploring something at the expense of a fellow countryman,
Right.
and whether is it giving additional pain to the person just for being part of my research. And the Indian Council of Medical Research has outlined very strong guidelines. There are 12-point guidelines, or 12 principles, as we call it, which needs to be followed. All research has to mandatorily go through the ethics committee. Now there are other additional committees also. If it involves gene modifications, there is a different committee for that.
Right.
They evaluate the pros and cons. And additionally, once these are approved, it doesn't mean that we can carry on. There are periodic monitoring. And if so, there are any adverse events that needs to be reported immediately. The
Right.
study is stopped, and again, an introspection is done as to whether it is related to the study or was the event outside of anything. So I think that is where one needs to exercise their moral ethics when undertaking research and not take these things at face value. For instance, I'll give you a quick example that in genetic testing, which has now done in large numbers in the country, and there are labs which are mushroomed. Unfortunately, India doesn't have any regulations for genetic testing.
Yeah.
In the US, for instance, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, guides genetic testing. You cannot undertake genetic testing on anyone. It has to be done only on the person where we can give some kind of a improvement to his existing condition. Either it could be through a therapy, either it could be through medicines or something where there has to be an improvement, a guaranteed improvement. It cannot be a trial. So, and then this kind of testing cannot be off the shelf. It cannot be a direct to consumer, as we call it technically, cannot be a DTC.
Right.
But these things are not followed yet in India because we still do not have any regulatory guidelines for genetic testing. And that needs to come in soon. So as biotech industry and the health industry is booming, there are many such things which are kind of penetrating inside. And because there is a business model to it, people are earning, because through these testings, it spreads through the word of mouth, it spreads through the media. And since there are no guidelines, people are kind of undertaking all this kind of things. But what is not realized is, let us say if you have a genetic defect, it doesn't mean that you are going to get a disease. As I said, if we randomly sequence our entire genome between you and me, we are likely to have 40 to 50 disease-causing mutations immediately.
Wow.
The reason we do not manifest is again because of those modifier genes which are also sitting there.
Right.
Yeah? Because nature has its own way to kind of circumvent all these situations. But what happens is when these kind of things are revealed in public, it has a huge social impact. There are disturbances in the family. If it is to a woman who is not having children, or if it is to a woman who is carrying a disease, I mean, just imagine the implications, the social implications, marital implications, and there are so many of these psychological things that needs to be taken care of. And that is why I think we need very strong regulations for these kind of treatments before it comes to the market, before it comes to anything. I remember one thing, like when I talked about this large-scale populations which we were screening. And earlier in our days, we were finding that often normal individuals also had these changes. I mean, these were many years back. And we were thinking whether did we do any mistake? Did we label the sample wrongly? Was it a sample of a patient? Or what was it? But after repeated experiments, when the same results persisted, we kind of stopped, paused for a moment, and again went back, read the literature, nothing was there. But over a period of time, with advances in gene sequencing, now we know that this is a very normal phenomena that is there in every individual. I think these kind of things where we are in doubt, we need to really kind of pause and understand I mean, there might be a underlying biological mechanism to it. Also.
Right. Right.
But if we do not have the complete know-how of it, that might be detrimental in certain cases. So if India is going to lead in precision medicine, precision health, etc., we need to take care. We need to be very accurate, very thorough in not only our understanding of genetics, but the results that are generated out of genetics for the patients and the results which can be taken to the clinic for clinical translation.
Oh, wow, sir. And you talked about ethics in scientific research. I was just reading about one of the experiments that happened way back in 1800s. I don't remember the exact year, wherein they were experimenting. They wanted to study stuttering, and they had two groups of children. One had natural stutter, and the other ones were normal. So to experiment, what they did was that when the normal child was speaking, they used to scold them, punish them. So those group of children who were normal, not stuttering, they thought that they are doing something wrong, and they then started developing stuttering, and they developed stuttering. It was intentionally done. So this was before the introduction of ethics in the scientific research. So rightly said, the way you balance scientific ambition with ethical clarity is deeply reassuring, Dr. Chakrabarti.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's it's one thing to chase breakthroughs and profits, but hearing how you prioritize dignity, safety, and public trust really shows the kind of leader and thinker you are.
Yeah, and unless India kind of develops this kind of public trust, this kind of assures the dignity of humans ahead of everything else.
Right.
Even if they are part of the research, I think it will be difficult for precision medicine to grow because people need to have the confidence in precision medicine.
Absolutely. Agreed. So, Dr. Chakrabarti, I know you've recently joined Directors Institute. What motivated you to take that step, and how has it added to your leadership journey so far?
So, while being in the academia and doing my research, being involved in multiple things, I realized that I'm at the intersections of doing science and systems that actually governs science. So I thought that my leadership role would be more profound, would be more appropriate if I could kind of have a structure around it. And the structure could be that there are different kinds of governance to these activities, be it a scientific activity, be it an academic activity, etc. There are rules of governance, be it promulgation of any mission and vision of an organization.
Right.
So my ambition or my goal towards joining the Directors Institute is to kind of integrate what I have learned in my journey in science, what I have learned in my journey as being part of many other organizations, and then kind of seeking what are the other nuances that need to come with it, so that that will influence policies, that will influence good governance of science. And that was one of the primary reasons of joining the Directors Institute. And I see that there are welcome changes now because scientists, clinicians, etc., are also being part of boardroom discussions.
Right.
Because the expertise and the skills that they bring in to the table are different from what is already existing there.
Absolutely.
And to that extent, I'm kind of intrigued that the principles of science, what we use, the rigor, the responsibility, the ethics of it are also kind of integrated into boardroom discussions, into boardroom governance.
Right.
And these are the things which I think I'll be able to contribute, because as scientists, we kind of have hypothesis, which is a kind of prediction. So we predict things ahead of time based on whatever knowledge is existing. And then we either prove or disprove the hypothesis based on whatever research we do. So in doing so, I think my role would be to kind of bring in those kind of expertise, those kind of skill sets, and which will further enrich governance in healthcare industry, in biotech industry, and in many other areas. Like, for instance, I would also say that apart from ARVO, I have been part of many of this task force of the National Institutes of Health. I have been in ClinGen, which is again an initiative of the National Institutes of Health, where, as you know, there is an avalanche of genetic data. So all this genetic data now is fed into a server which is called the ClinVar, or the clinical variants. But since there has not been too much of checks and balances, so we find that many of these data are futile. So we, as experts, not only from here, but from all over the world, there are multiple panels of experts who now kind of review these data, who kind of validates this data and then provides inputs for their inclusion towards accurate, appropriate, and affordable clinical translation. So, and obviously my existing roles where I am has also kind of shaped me in kind of providing some newer avenues towards devising not only appropriate diagnostic modalities, but appropriate healthcare in settings where healthcare hasn't reached. So, yeah. So there are a lot of unmet needs in the population. And I think my role would be to kind of fill up those gaps with my skills, expertise, and experience.
Right. Wow, sir, that is such an inspiring step. And, it's so powerful to see someone with your scientific depth now looking forward to shaping the leadership conversations in the boardroom. And you bring a clarity of purpose that's so rare. And also, you talk about ethics in the last question, and, having scientists and researchers in the boardroom would actually add on to that ethics side of the boardroom. So, yeah, I mean, definitely leaders like yourself are, meant to be in a boardroom. And I wish you all the best for your
Thank you.
upcoming adventures, I would say.
So,
Wow.
thank you very much for this long, I think, interview, which went beyond our time. But I think we had a good conversation.
It was so interesting.
And additionally, I think I could kind of narrate not only my career, my research goals, aims, objectives, roles, and responsibilities, but I think I could also kind of provide some insights on the potential of using my skill sets or my experience in boardroom governance and in leaderships.
Absolutely.
I think that was really, really a very great interview, and I really liked every moment of it.
I'm so glad, sir. I really enjoyed talking to you.
And you have been a great anchor, to say.
Thank you so much.
Giving a lot of freedom. And I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.